gas. Guten Morgen, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The sitting is open. The next item on the agenda is Council and Commission statements, the power of the EU joint European action for more affordable, secure and sustainable energy. I'd like to remind you that you'll be able to request Catch the Eye and blue cards via your voting machine after having inserted your voting card. So I would invite you always to bring your voting card with you to the chamber. The instructions have been made available in the chamber. If you'd like to register for a Catch the Eye intervention, I would call on you to do that as of now and not wait until the end of the debate. I'd also like to remind you that interventions in the chamber will continue to be made from the central rostrum. That's not the case for Catch the Eye and blue cards, nor for points of order, however. So I would ask you to keep an eye on the speakers list and make sure you approach the rostrum when your speaking time is about to start. Given those words of introduction, I'd like to move on to the item on the agenda and invite Minister Clément Beaune to take the floor.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Vice Presidents, ladies and gentlemen, members of the European Parliament. You know the abject and totally unjustified military operations in the Ukraine are things that concern us on a daily basis. Amongst their many effects, we have problems with energy supply for Ukraine firstly, but also for the European Union and beyond. Amongst these effects, we've seen a substantial increase of gas prices in the EU, as well as an international rise in petrol prices, and then also since autumn 2021 we've seen its effect on the economic recovery. We therefore needed a targeted recovery to ensure the security of energy supply and reduce as soon as possible our dependency towards Russia in cooperation with our international partners. Diversification of our supply becomes a priority now, which we're working upon. And there I would like to start by thanking the Commission for their recent proposals over the last months and over the last days. We know that we have to take into account reality. Today, the European Union imports 45% of its gas from Russia and 25% of oil, 45% of our coal imports. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, these issues were immediately debated by energy ministers under the French presidency of Council, with the organisation of an extraordinary council on the 28th of February last. That council made it possible to make it clear that EU ran no immediate risk in terms of supply. Security of supply is assured for the end of this winter and for coming months, both for gas and for oil. This is a strong, reassuring message that we need to repeat. But the Council also made it possible immediately to start coordinating a large number of necessary concrete measures supporting Ukraine, including synchronizing electricity system with ours, which is something we've been working on over the last days, and I think through our solidarity actions with Ukraine, we should be welcoming this with Ukraine, but also with Moldova. This connection will ensure security of supply in the short term. The Council also looked at the toolbox that was presented in October last by the Commission, and the Member States on that basis introduced over the last months various measures to counter the hike in energy prices, to actually reflect changing circumstances. But the question of our dependency on Russian gas is a highly complex one. It's the most important point. It's highly topical and obviously requires attention and more action. In Versailles, amongst the discussions of the heads of state and government recently, such a debate took place. On the basis of the Commission's Repower EU plan, we need to accelerate our reduction of dependency. We need to diversify in a coordinated fashion the supply of our energy, and we need to speed up the energy transition measures. A dependent continent is a weak continent. We have to take that into account in short term using the measures described, but also for the medium and long term, because apart from this attack, this war, the question of dependency has shown to what extent Europe cannot be sovereign unless it has an energy policy, amongst others, that's more ambitious. The Versailles discussions were essential and concrete, preparing the ground for the European Council meeting starting this afternoon. All of these subjects will be dealt with there on the basis of the proposals made less than 48 hours ago by the European Commission, reducing dependency, diversification of supply, extra investment that's required, ensuring that we can, in fact, master the prices, possible price caps, the way the market works. Nothing can be taboo in such exceptional circumstances. You know that, but I say that on behalf of the presidency. Discussions on such a subject are sometimes complicated. We need, though, a Europe to be independent of imports of fossil fuels from Russia. That's already a historic choice which will make it possible to shore up our energy sovereignty. We need to accelerate our efforts to increase European independence of fossil fuels, full stop, starting with gas, obviously. Diversification of sources and routes of supply, transition to clean, green forms of energy is imperative. We also have to take into account two dimensions in our energy strategy: the social impact on households, the middle class in particular, our economies, our industries. It would be counterproductive to weaken Europe when we're trying to reinforce it, and taking into account too the international dimension above and beyond the current war. We can't ask efforts of our economies if we can't ensure that they're respected by others. I'm thinking about the debate, for example, for the CBAM, which is very important, and there was a debate on this in Council a couple of days ago. This needs to be continued and speeded up. We really are coming to the very origins of the European project, because since the 50s it's been based on pooling energy resources. The mechanisms we're talking about today, pooled storage, accelerating the transition, coordinated measures, all of these are mechanisms similar to those that actually were at the birth of our common effort almost 80 years ago. Thank you very much, and I'm at your disposal for questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, on behalf of the Commission, Executive Vice President Dombrovskis, you have the floor, sir.
Madam Chair, Mr. Minister, honourable members. First of all, thank you for welcoming me here today this morning. Commissioner Simpson apologises that she could not speak to you as she is participating at the meeting of the International Energy Agency in Paris. I know that last week she had a chance to present the Commission's Repower EU communication to the ITRE committee. This communication has implications for every single EU citizen, so the Commission is grateful to have this opportunity to present it to you today. What we are seeing right now in Ukraine is an attack on some of the most important values. We are standing with Ukraine as it fights for its freedom. The war has had a ripple effect on Europe's energy policy and energy security. And it's now moving into a new era. It is now clearer than ever that we need to move even faster to reshape our energy system and bring our dependence on Russian energy to the end as soon as possible. We are not starting this work only now. Since 2009, when Russia stopped gas deliveries to Ukraine, we have been working to diversify and secure our energy supplies. Thanks to adequate regulatory and financial toolbox, we have succeeded in building a dense, well-interconnected and resilient energy network, which has effectively prevented damaging disruptions of energy supply, including under current difficult geopolitical circumstances. For example, we have worked to bring 8 new LNG terminals in the EU, and in January of this year, we imported more LNG than ever before. Even so, we are not yet there where we need to be, but we believe that this communication gives us the necessary plan to get there. The communication adopted on 8th of March has 3 main pillars. First, Repower EU, which is our plan to bring down our dependence on Russian fossil fuels well before the end of the decade. Second, on security of supply, immediate measures to improve our gas supply for next winter. And third, on affordability, a set of measures to mitigate the impact of high energy prices on households and companies. So I will go through all 3 pillars, and I will begin with Repower EU. As I said, the goal of this pillar is to phase out Russian fossil fuels. This is done with a special focus on gas by diversifying our supplies, massively investing in renewables, green hydrogen, and boosting energy efficiency. 2 weeks ago, EU leaders came together at the Versailles summit and agreed to the key principle behind Repower EU. We must be in charge of our own energy future. And that means that we cannot let any third country to destabilize our energy markets nor influence our energy choices. This year, we need to reduce reliance on Russian fossil fuels imported through diversification of supplies and greater reliance on LNG and energy savings. Over the next 5 years, and starting already now, we need to speed up our switch to renewables, increase energy efficiency, and develop new clean technologies like hydrogen. Renewables are a perfect solution for Europe. They are homegrown, they create jobs, and they spur innovation. They are a strategic investment in both our economy and our security and independence. On security of supply, we need to double down our efforts and make sure that we are much better prepared for coming winters. There are 2 facts about which we are sure. First, we are not yet ready to give up gas entirely. And second, if we continue to use gas as a transition fuel, as much as possible, that gas should come from non-Russian sources. LNG gives us an opportunity here to further diversify. At the same time, we could face an interruption of supply in Europe, and we need to make sure that Europe is ready to face that. Right now, we are emerging from winter into relatively mild spring season, so any disruption would not cause any major issues given the current levels of storage in Europe and of imports from alternative suppliers. What we need to do now is start getting ready for the next heating season, by which point it is crucial to ensure that our gas storages are full. And we have delivered on this with a gas storage legislation that was adopted this week, a proposal. Our proposal requires that underground gas storage facilities across the EU are filled at least 80% by 1st of November this year and 90% in the following years. To get there, it also sets some intermediate targets from February to October each year. Member States will monitor the filling levels on a monthly basis and report to the Commission accordingly. Having sufficient gas in storage facilities across the EU is joint responsibility and will benefit everyone. Member States without gas storage facilities are required to ensure that gas is stored in other EU countries corresponding to at least 15% of their annual gas consumption. As an alternative option, member States without storage facilities may instead jointly develop a burden-sharing mechanism with one or more member states with storage facilities. Furthermore, given the strategic importance of gas storages, we are also proposing an obligation to certify all underground gas storage operators to avoid potential energy security risks linked to the ownership of the storage facility. Owners of non-certified storage system operators will have to give up their ownership. This legislation is yet another example on how the Commission can deliver in lightning speed what is needed. I know I can count on you and on the Council to ensure a fast-track procedure and get this proposal adopted as soon as possible. In the meantime, Member States will need to start the refilling of storage capacities, and the Commission will coordinate this in the coming months. We have already set up a platform to do that. We are also ready to expand its tasks as necessary to create a fully fledged energy task force that could not only coordinate the refilling process, but also prepare the ground for a more structured energy cooperation with key gas suppliers. In parallel, we are reassessing scenarios for partial and full disruption of gas flows from Russia next winter to help Member States revise their gas supply contingency plans and better coordinate their efforts in a spirit of solidarity. What we can see clearly at this point is that there is a need for a more coordinated EU gas policy on buying, storing and responding to any supply disruption. This is also why we have stepped up our work with the Member States in a gas coordination group to reinforce regional cooperation and encourage new solidarity agreements. Beyond diversification, we are also working full speed to reduce the need for fossil gas in the first place, because fossil fuel markets have been proven to be highly volatile. This includes boosting renewables and energy efficiency. And it means more biomethane and renewable hydrogen, more renovation, heat pumps and solar panels on rooftops. It means getting serious about saving energy, which is one way that everyone can contribute to solving the current crisis. This is only going to work if we remove the barriers that are currently standing in the way of boosting renewables. Permitting is one of the biggest challenges we face. It is simply an issue of practicality. We cannot boost renewables to the scale we need if it takes years and years to authorize a single project. Therefore, the Commission will propose ways to simplify and shorten permitting and authorization, promote the take-up of corporate power purchase agreements, and develop a European solar energy supply chain. Third, the pillar of the communication is on affordability. Given the extraordinary circumstances we are now facing, Member States can temporarily regulate electricity and gas prices for households and micro-enterprises. The communication comes with detailed guidance on how to design these schemes. The Commission also just adopted a new temporary crisis framework for state aid, offering Member States options to provide short-term relief to undertaking by the Russian invasion in Ukraine, liquidity support in the form of public guarantees and loans, and finally, temporary support to alleviate exceptionally severe increases in price of gas and electricity. New support measures need sufficient funding, of course. One option is to use ETS revenues. From January 2021 to February 2022, emission trading generated €30 billion for national budgets. Member States also have the possibility to take advantage of windfall profits in the energy sector and tax them. The Commission is looking into all possible options for emergency measures to limit the impact of high gas prices spreading to energy costs for end users. Concretely, in line with Versailles Declaration, the Commission put forward options for exceptional and short-time measures, and these options will be discussed today by the European Council, which takes place today and tomorrow. The Commission will also assess options to optimise the electricity market design to reap the benefits from low-cost energy. The final report on the Agency for the Cooperation of Energy Regulators, ACER, will inform our work on this, as well as other contributions on the functioning of the electricity market. So, honourable members, these are our proposals in a nutshell. We hope to move very fast on presenting all these proposals and on all legislative proposals under Fit for 55, and we count on your support. This is part of the solution to make the EU resilient to shocks and less dependent on Russian fossil fuels. We need to be united while facing these challenging times. And if there is one thing that this crisis is showing to us, that is that the EU is more united than ever in responding to Putin and supporting the Ukrainian people. I look forward for hearing your views. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the debate with representatives of the group, starting with the European People's Party. Mr. Pieper.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I was listening to the two previous speakers, but I didn't hear our dependence on Russian fuel rods and uranium, but maybe that'll come later. We have an unprecedented level of sanctions against Russia and providing an unprecedented level of arms to Ukraine, and this seems to be having an effect. And people need to understand, and people understand that they're at high energy prices, but there is still a misunderstanding or lack of understanding of why people haven't reduced the taxation on energy. We need to reduce our dependency on Putin, of course. We need to strengthen our purchasing power in general. Coal and nuclear power should provide a transition, a bridge. We need to make sure we have security of supply, so the extent of infrastructure is important. LNG first and hydrogen later. We're really pushing forward on that. Two important points. First of all, looking at the development of renewables, we have to make sure authorization goes ahead. We shouldn't ideologize biomass. We need to be technologically neutral as well. We won't be able to have enough hydrogen in the near future, so we need low carbon futures to make our future possible. We need to decouple gas from the general electricity price. But now on competition, given that an idea would be to give up competition at all, I don't think that would be good for the time immediately after the war. It's easier not to give up that, because otherwise afterwards it would prove very difficult. Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, Mr. Nica.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to the Commission for this document that we've been asking for a long time. It's better than nothing, and it's good that we have a proposal that deals with compulsory storage of natural gas. This will lead to a drop in prices that we want so much, and to gas supply security. Unfortunately, Commissioner, Minister, the mechanism for common purchase of natural gas is not operational, and this will hamper a drop in prices and having gas security this winter. And I'm very unhappy, Commissioner. The price of gas in these gas hubs is not based on cost, but on speculation. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable that in the EU we have countries like Romania where someone can sell energy 10 times more expensive than its cost. This has nothing to do with market economy. It has nothing to do with what an energy market means. And member states like Romania, a family can pay for energy more than a minimum wage is a failure of the market. Why don't we tax this windfall? Because they are clear the result of speculation. And those who are against this price, the price capping, there's not capping that kills competition. What hampers competition is this speculation, and this needs to be punished. Please give us an operational energy market. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Als nächstes.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Renew Europe Group, Mr. Peterson.
Tak, formand.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The war in Ukraine has started. Mr. Putin has us where he wants us because we're reliant on his gas and have been for decades. So it's high time to change the way we do things. I remember back in '73, the old oil crisis. That That was when we could play football in the roads of Copenhagen because there were no cars. We had to save energy. We need to save energy now as well. Industry, buildings, we need to turn down the thermostats. We need to maybe put an extra jumper on, and we need to start awareness raising campaigns to make citizens understand it's worth saving energy. We have to speed up renewable energies, not just onshore but offshore as well. These new sources of energy, of course, then can be developed in the interests of Europe. We have to make sure that we're producing energy closer to where the citizens are consuming it. We need to maybe look at how we can change things, moving away from Putin. The only way to do things is to work together to show solidarity and allow the Commission to do everything they can to stop Putin. The problem is things are going so slowly, and that's why the Council of Ministers needs to act quickly. And the European Parliament as well needs to accelerate the green transition and make sure that works within the European Parliament. Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Greens European Free Alliance, Mr. Niinistö.
Madam President, Putin is the aggressor in this war in Ukraine. Yet every day we continue to buy his fossil fuels, we fund this attack on peaceful Ukraine and support his power. So we have to do our utmost to get rid of this dependency fast. We in the Greens appreciate the Commission on acting on diversification of fossil fuel supplies and introducing a gas storage obligation to keep homes warm next winter. But this should not mean investments into new fossil fuel infrastructure that would just lock in our dependency to fossil fuels from elsewhere in the long term. So that would fail us and our people on urgent climate action. So we need joint purchases, better coordination and cooperation and solidarity between member states to act on high energy prices, but we also need to hasten our investments in renewables and energy efficiency. We call on member states to do more to support vulnerable households using flexibilities in the existing framework, for example through direct payments or vouchers. This is urgently needed for those who cannot foot their energy bills. Price caps on gas are fossil fuel subsidies. They are ineffective and strain the public purse, as also mentioned by the ECB President Lagarde. We should rather tax windfall profits from energy companies and direct them to those in need, and also direct them into new investments in renewables and energy efficiency. The message on storage and market design should be strictly limited in scope and time. Filling up our storages and ensuring bearable energy bills will cost a lot of money, and we need to invest at the same time to cut energy consumption and ramp up renewables. So we have to have short-term action to get rid of dependency, long-term action to create independence in energy. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön. Nächster.
Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of Identity and Democracy, Mr. Borchia.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, from this morning's debate, the impression one has is firstly we decide on our goal, and then afterwards we decide whether it can be achieved. Trying to eliminate dependence on Russian gas is all very well, but we don't seem really to be thinking how we're going to do that. And joint purchases. Well, if you think about the energy policy of the European Union, this runs totally counter to that, what we've done over the last few years. And so I think we need more details. The idea that we have to have a certain amount of gas in storage is a good idea, but that will increase prices, which is not what we need. And over the years, I think we have done everything to ensure the Union was too dependent on energy imports. Now, though it's households and it's companies that are going to be paying the price for this when they can't pay their bills.
Thank you. The next speaker for the ECR group is Mr. Krasnodebski. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Moja grupa również uważa, że propozycje...
Now, the ECR fraction thinks that Commission's proposals are indeed good, because we will be less dependent on the Russian gas. But that means that until February 24th this year, we have been going in the entirely wrong direction. And I've been here for 7 years, and I've never had that we actually admitted that we actually made wrong decisions. That applies to both the Commission, the European Commission, and the European Parliament, as we were growing more and more dependent on the Russian energy supplies. And you have been warned. Now we are planning to purchase gas jointly, gas storage facilities, and other possible solutions, and a quicker transformation towards renewable energy sources. But now there is a race towards purchasing of fossil fuels. A good example was a visit of a German minister in Qatar. So there is a discrepancy between what we are doing and what the plans are.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. The next speaker for the left group is Ms. Aubry.
Le printemps est arrivé. Spring is here, the trees are in bloom, and temperatures have risen. It's even 20 degrees in some parts. Now, this is the time that the European Commission has chosen to wake up, given the huge increase in electricity and gas prices. And I must admit, I'm very surprised. You're asking member states to regulate their prices and to even tax energy giants with windfall profits. I would have almost thought it's April Fool's Day, but it's too early. So the Commission has finally realized that the energy market is absurd, that it only leads to price hikes for households and huge profits for businesses. So why did we have to wait for the end of the winter to deal with this? Prices went up even before the war in Ukraine. I read a lot, so I think I found the answer. And in your annexes, you say, Commissioner, that we mustn't call into question the competitiveness of markets. And you also talk about the general goals of the EU's energy policy. So let us not tamper with free competition because prices might go up. It was too good to be true. Italy has introduced a 10% tax on big firms that have seen their profits go up, but they're the only ones. We have our work cut out for us. You're talking about millions of windfall profits. In France, Total made profits of 6 billion euro, while it costs people more than €2 per litre for their petrol. Look at electricity prices, gas prices. We also have to look at all basic need prices. Thank you. Basic product prices.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Begin as a non-attached member.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you very much, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, energy and fuel prices have reached unsustainable levels in the whole of Europe, and it's not just the fault of the war, it's also because of disgraceful speculation. Yes, it's true, in the short term we've got to reduce taxes and duties, but the EU has to investigate this distortion that is making a few very wealthy but have really affected many others, especially households and SMEs. The EU is the biggest energy importer in the world, and it has to take advantage of its clout in order to go for joint energy purchases and to cap fuel prices. But in the long term, the only real response is renewables. And my movement has been talking about this for 10 years. And those who say that the transition is too expensive at the moment, I would say to them, if we had completed this, our citizens would be paying half of what they're paying at the moment. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Carvalho for 1 minute.
Madam President, Minister, Commissioner, colleagues. Security of supply of energy, as well as reducing our external vulnerability, are more important than ever. The Repower EU initiative is a positive one, but it lacks ambition and clarity in the short term. What we need are specific, tangible steps based on existing capacity and meeting the requirements for new infrastructure, such as LNG terminals and links, particularly to the Iberian Peninsula. We need to know about the financing for these projects and how we can protect our citizens from the price hikes as well as our industry. Otherwise, the situation will exacerbate if nothing is done. Our efforts need to be more ambitious in reducing the tax burden. We need to act decisively, and we need to act now. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Gaia for 1 minute.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Minister Bone, Vice President Dombrovskis, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is correct. We want to make the EU independent in terms of energy supply of Russia. That is the political message that we've understood. So let us have an acceleration of the transition now. The mistakes that have been committed in the past are becoming clear now. Some were too optimistic in what they saw as economic and peaceful cooperation, and others, and here I'm looking to your government, Mr. Bun, were not doing enough to complete the single market in energy, to keep those pipelines, for example, between France and Spain, that hasn't been completed is a problem. And, Vice President, the point about the interconnectors show that the infrastructure is still problematic. Let us look at what needs to be done urgently by way of infrastructure, because that's what we can do to help each other as member states. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Gammon for 1.5 minutes.
It's on.
It's working now. Thank you very much, Madam President. The war of aggression of Russia on Ukraine has shown that a dependence on energy providers is a dependency on dictators. It's this dependency that has meant that across the board, electricity and heating bills are going through the roof. But are we really doing enough to make sure, on the one hand, that we're relieving the burden on people, but also making sure we're planning for future winters to stop this dependency for once and for all? Mr. Krasnodebski, I heard what he said about the self-satisfaction, about the energy transition is the one that's at fault for us being in this situation. That's quite simply not true. I don't get the impression that we in this chamber have understood the situation we are in. We are still pretending as if it's okay to take gas as a transitional solution for the coming years or decades. What are we going to do in the future when we want to import more LNG? Do we think it's going to be cheaper? It's just ridiculous. It's crazy. Our citizens are still going to be held hostage to a dependency that will cost them more and more. The one thing that we can genuinely do is make sure that the energy transition is completed at light speed. We need to have a general mobilization to work with energy efficiency, with transport, find solutions that will be cheaper for them, better for them. That's the only thing that's going to get us out of this dependency and will enable the European Union to make sure that it stands truly by its values.
Danke sehr.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Toussaint for 1.5 minutes.
Monsieur le Ministre,
Minister, Commissioner, today we're here to talk about Repower EU and energy prices. And of course, the two are inextricably linked. And this has been mentioned by several colleagues. Because even before the war in Ukraine, we saw energy price hikes. And to be more specific, it was fossil fuel price hikes. Now we have lofty words. We're talking about leaving fossil fuels behind, about reducing our dependence on Russia, energy efficiency and even energy savings. But however, in practice, the situation is very different. There's no Russian gas and oil embargo. And then when the Commission suggests that we go forward with windfall taxes for the giants, member states are still talking about it and want to flank the industry and therefore provide even subsidies for fossil fuels. We're talking about a proposal up to €100 billion in grants and subsidies. So we're talking about 2 years of investment that is necessary in France to guarantee a transition. So 100 billion, which is the same amount as what we wanted to give the South to make sure that they move forward their transition. The worst is that reducing price drops in the markets haven't translated into lower prices at petrol stations. It's only Italy that has imposed a tax on its businesses. You want to continue storing gas when gas prices have gone up and are going to continue going up. So we're still continuing with fossil fuels. What are we waiting for? Why aren't we stopping those who are destroying our planet? We have to think about climate justice, action for climate. Let us make sure that we can support those who don't have the means. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Lacapelle, not Miss Lacapelle. Mr. Lacapelle, apologise.
Thank you, Madam President. The health crisis and the war in Ukraine do show that the EU, which promises to protect us, has betrayed us and weakened us. In a world of free competition, you've got everything wrong on health, as we saw in the pandemic, but also digital and energy. Your ideology has supplanted pragmatism, and now it's the peoples of Europe that are going to suffer from these bad choices in terms of their purchasing power. The cheapest form of energy really is what provides sovereignty. And if you look at the energy market and if you look at the attempt at dismantling ETF, then you can see what your choices are. You've made yourself dependent on the rest of the world in all areas. This federal Europe needs to resign and give over its place to a Europe of nations which can build up projects such as Ariane. Marine Le Pen in a few days hopefully will be able to change direction and actually defend the peoples of Europe. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Als nächsten Redner.
Thank you very much. I would call Mr. Rose, but we can't see him in the chamber. If he hasn't sat at his place but elsewhere, maybe he could indicate. No? Okay, we'll continue then with Miss Rego.
Für eine Minute.
For 1 minute.
Bitte schön.
Thank you, Madam President.
Hvala vam lijepa, predsjedateljice. Posljednjih mjeseci u mojoj zemlji su se učetverostručile cijene električne energije, a cijene nafte.
While industry is making profits, we're seeing prices skyrocket. The economic model has led to impoverishment of the people that's unacceptable over the last weeks. There's a common denominator whereby energy multinationals become rich and Putin blackmails us. That's what your model does. But if we agree that European funds are shared between
Evropski fondovi trebaju odgovoriti na ovo.
Ladies and gentlemen from the Council and Commission, please start taking proper decisions. Do something. For example, start by ensuring that the profits of the multinationals are used to meet the most vulnerable's needs, and stop once and for all with this market which marginalizes the most vulnerable.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Nicolas Alavanos for 1 minute.
People are suffering because of fuel price hikes and commodity price hikes. This is being affected by the imperialist war, but they did go up before. This is because of the liberalization of the energy market, green transition, green taxes, and therefore the expectations that the member states and the EU are going to solve the problem are unrealistic. We have an arms race for NATO and the EU. We're talking about a lot of investment in American LNG and through Eurobonds. You are increasing rivalries which led to the Russian war, and therefore we're talking about a boxing match of different interests. Today, 23 years after the intervention that destroyed Yugoslavia, we've got an imperialist war in Ukraine. We condemn the Russian war, but we have to make sure that we get rid of certain taxes, VAT on household goods, and make sure that we meet people's needs. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Buzek for 1 minute.
Dziękuję, pani przewodnicząca.
No, thank you, Chairman. We are speeding up with the energy transformation in order to make sure that Putin doesn't get money from the Union from any kind of fuels. And I support this ambitious goal to bring down the gas imports by 2/3, perhaps even more. We need to diversify supply and support financially investments such as LNG terminals, collectors and others. The Commission needs to do utmost in this particular department. But before the next winter comes, we need to make sure that the gas storage or gas storages are full. As the head of the negotiation team, I'd like to tell you that we are determined to make sure that this legislation is passed through in the months to come. We need to purchase gas jointly. I proposed this solution as early as 2010, together with Jacques Delors. And I'm happy that you have grown up to see that this is actually a good solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Toya for 1 minute.
Today we are being called by history to make a qualitative leap in terms of our energy policy, to build an energy union which had already been discussed, and we need to do this with extraordinary measures and with nothing being taboo, starting with storage. And the idea of common storage is good, but I'd ask for more. I think we need strategic reserves which will genuinely guarantee our security of supply on common purchasing. We see the Commission is open to this, but I would like this to actually become much more robust. We did this with vaccinations. We need to do this now. Who are we talking about? We're talking about deals with countries and amongst countries open to coordination on prices. We do need price capping mechanisms if our economies are not to be brought to their knees and families are not to be brought into poverty. And we have to do this by doing away with some of the speculation. We need to adjust things without worrying about doing so, because unless we do that, our economies could be completely destroyed. So I would wish courage to Council and Commission. Parliament will support you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dante is the next speaker for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Vice President of the Commission, I have 3 brief comments. We have an emergency to tackle. Energy prices have gone up and we might have problem with our production system and will cause problems for households. We have to lay the groundwork to deal with next winter. The European Commission includes proposals on pre-intervention, adequate gas storage in November, and so on. Now, the second point is pretty obvious. We have to speed up the transition as much as possible. But in order to do so, we have to leave behind ideological approaches, and we have to look at renewable sources and energy efficiency. We also have to make sure that we diversify fossil fuel supplies, because we still need fossil fuels. The third point, we have our Green Deal as our environmental goal, but the crisis in Ukraine shows that this is an urgent matter. We have to make sure that the EU has strategic autonomy, because our freedom and sovereignty hinge on this. And also we will continue to provide support for all of this. Thank you.
Als nächstes spricht die Kollegin.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Paulus for 1 minute.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner. The answer to the energy crisis cannot be that fossil fuels should be subsidised in an unconditional way. Of course, the Green Deal will make us independent in the longer term. That's not going to help us at this moment. It's not going to help those citizens who are suffering from sky-high prices, and it's not going to help those companies who are facing closure because of these costs. Now, we've heard some of the proposals, which is good, but the focus is on diversification. So we basically was changing one fossil gas for another fossil gas, one dependency for another dependency. But in the meantime, there is an impressive number of studies that show that we need to be independent and can be independent well ahead of 2027 of Russian oil and gas. So we have to get going. I would call on the Commission to show more ambition. Work harder on the subsidies being removed in places and placed elsewhere to help, so that it will help citizens and companies. And imagine that we need a stronger solar industry in Europe, and it's high time you address that. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Buchheit for 1 minute.
Dankeschön.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Paulus, I heard what you said about having a strong solar industry in Europe, but that's what has led to the fact that we lost about $1 billion. It was just thrown out the window in trying to do that. We've heard what a lot of people have said, that we should have ambition to get rid of some of these green air balloons that they are putting up, that we're launching all sorts of ideas which we then have to row back on. An example, Moorburg near Hamburg was a coal power station that was initiated, commissioned, worked for 5 years, and then was decommissioned again, and will at best only be available as a reserve. That's a waste of money. And then, you know, of course, we need to listen to the criticism that's being levelled, but from experts, not from influencers, and I think that's what we want to understand for the future. Yes, understand the critics, understand what's gone on, and please move back from this Green Deal before it's too late.
Dankeschön.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Tobiszowski for 1 minute.
Pani Przewodnicząca.
Madam Chair, colleagues, the European Commission is talking about quick getting to independence from Russian gas, and it seems to be the right direction. However, I am worried with the proposal in the gas package, the proposal excluding tariff reduction in entering points from LNG terminals. However, we can give rebates to installations storing ecological gas. However, terminals are there to grant security and diversify the sources, and that has been proved by the present situation of Russian aggression. So the key task should be support from diversification and own resources. Non-discrimination between energy sources should be the most important task, and only in that way we can reach our goals. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Als nächstes
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Matias for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Obviously, state aid and price caps and windfall taxes on profit could actually provide around 200 million euros and are steps in the right direction, but the proposals of the Commission fail the essential test. Energy continues to be dealt with as a market good, not a right, and its price is fixed on the stock market. And the mechanism for price forming is also not affected. In 2021, we had actually prices which were much too high, and the Commission continues to defend the system over people. We need a fairer system as we move towards an energy system that provides fair supply. What we need is to ensure that we go onto the offensive. Unfortunately, citizens are living in very difficult circumstances. The reason we have these problems is because the energy policy failed. If we want to change that failure, then that will help our citizens.
Thank you very much. Mr. Radakovsky is not visible. If he sat somewhere else, no. Okay, well, Ms. Spiraki then is the next speaker for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Mr. Dombrovskis, ladies and gentlemen, we all agree that we are in the eye of the storm and our citizens are looking towards us here in Brussels. It is a pressing matter to take short-term and medium-term measures, and the European Commission's proposals on joint gas purchases, LNG gas storage, and 90% full storage for the winter clearly reflect the fact that we have learned the lessons of the pandemic and we are harnessing these lessons, but prices have shot through the roof, and that's why we need emergency measures. We have to regulate natural gas and electricity prices, and we have to, and unfortunately the taxation of companies is not enough. We need a time-limited intervention in the wholesale gas market. Mr. Mitsotakis, the Greek Prime Minister, has put a proposal on the table so that we can have a free market that works. If we want to have a free market that works, we have to make sure that our citizens don't become poorer because of the crisis. We have to defend our values with very serious sanctions against Russia, but we also have to protect the cohesion of our societies. We have to fast-track renewables. We have to renovate buildings. We have to increase investment, but above all, we have to do everything we can to protect our citizens from the storm.
The next speaker is Mr. González Cáceres for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. If we've learnt one thing from the pandemic, it's that joint actions lead us to joint solutions benefiting everybody. For some time we've been saying energy prices are a problem, and Putin has played with gas prices for too long. We mustn't allow this to continue. For once and for all, we need to cap the prices for gas and electricity and uncouple the two. But at the same time, we need to take steps to actually cap prices amongst households paying for energy. This is something we've said on various times because we're going to see this problem across the whole of Europe. We're seeing people on the streets in some countries demonstrating. I think really what we need to do is look at the effect on people's pockets of this war and other things. But what we can't do is carry on discussing this again and again, because the problems are just getting worse. It's our responsibility to look and see what's happening to people and to take steps to deal with the current situation. We are in a situation where war is ongoing, and what we need to do is to be brave and decisive in the decisions we take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Torvalds for 1 minute.
Madam President, dear Minister, Commissioner, let me start with a statement we all know is true, but the implication of which we tend to go around. There will be no quick and easy fixes. For an undefinable time, we will have an unstable and unreliable Russia on our borders. And the implications are huge, and we seem to be slightly unwilling to understand it. From the very first day, I said that we need to have two windows, one for speeding up the transition to a low-carbon economy, the other to find bridging solutions for the next 3, 5, 7 years. So far, we seem to be united, but as soon as we go into the concrete proposals, everybody seems to bring in his or her holy cow. LNG is not good. We need gas. Renewables are good as long as they don't come from biosources or forests, or then we speak about prices and so on. But the truth is the following. Every cubic meter of Russian gas, every barrel of Russian oil, every load of Russian coal is dripping with blood, innocent Ukrainian blood. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Bloss for 1 minute.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, Madam President. Yesterday I spoke to Irish, who is a young refugee from Ukraine, and he had one wish: don't buy any more gas, oil or coal from Putin. Don't finance this war with your climate-doomed way of life. There are millions of euros that we pay to Putin every day for his war machinery, which is unacceptable. But rather than trying to use all our powers to push renewable energies, you're taking time. Let's wait, as Mr. Dombrovskis says, until May for the solar strategy. Refugees don't have time. We don't have time. I'm asking you now, switch into war mode. Switch on your turbo for renewable energies and a reduction of the use of coal, oil and gas. And don't start now to make sure that you're subsidizing Putin's millions with subsidied money. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Hakkarainen for 1 minute.
Arvoisa puhemies.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I have a few points to make. Today we talked about courage and about action. But I think that we mustn't forget about nuclear power. Nuclear power allows us to generate electricity. At the moment, we need fuel for our cars, but cars don't have much of a future. Now, Russia is a threat. They've always been a threat. They've been a threat for a long time, and now we have to put an end to the current situation. We depend on Russian energy, and we have to put an end to this. Finland, my country, wants to be self-sufficient. When it comes to electricity, we can use peat in order to do this. We also have to avoid any climate hysteria.
Thank you. Mr. Yaki is the next speaker for 1 minute.
Dziękuję Pani Przewodnicząca, Panie Komisarzu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, you could stop the money for Putin in 3 minutes, and you could rely on atom and coal, but you don't want to do it because you would have to admit your ideological mistake. We are talking about emissions, CO2 emissions, but on the other hand, you were not able to stop the war. It is good to sell the Russian gas, which is full of the Ukrainian blood, and you say that you are doing it for the planet. You are wearing the Ukrainian colors, but you are trying to relieve your conscience. However, you are still doing great deals with Putin. It's enough to see the list of companies that are doing business with Putin, French, Dutch, German companies. So what is your coherence? You can see that your comfort is more important for you than the life of Ukrainian women and children. And these are your European values. That's a shame.
Dankeschön. Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Montserrat for 1 minute.
Presidenta.
Thank you, President. Europe should never depend on a tyrant like Putin. We need a common interconnected energy market. We need interconnections of gas with infrastructure to connect Spain and Portugal with the rest of Europe. We need to act now. Families and companies are desperate because of the price increases. It's impoverishing everybody every day. The Repower plan to guarantee security of supply and affordable prices will be vital, but the European Commission needs to act more quickly and effectively. Otherwise, it'll be too late. We also need to demand of the member states that they already start reducing taxes that they require on energy. In Spain, we're suffering from Sanchez's lack of action. We need to ensure that the items on the gas bill that aren't linked to energy are reduced or are done away with. This is having an effect on fishermen, on farmers, on hauliers. They need action now. All they're getting is the contempt of the Sanchez government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Kumpula-Natri for 1 minute.
The Minister, the Commissioner, the colleagues, the Commission communication on Repower EU is important. It can be read as check how much we finance the war machine in Russia. 1 month today. Do we dare to count how much does it mean? 30 times 700 million euros. I don't want to count that, but I find it promising that Commission statement is now working on the speeding up the transition, how the energy efficiency first principle can be done for the next winter and especially years to come. And the fast permitting for renewable energy could be more binding than just recommendation. Quick action is needed to diversify the sources, and gas storage obligation is important, or other fuel when suitable in some countries. So let's look for the next winter or two, but do not waste a single month to speed up the transition. The availability and production for the heat pumps, solar panels, energy efficiency actions, renovation, all these every month counts, and we can reduce the bills for the export.
Vielen Dank. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Knotek.
Thank you. Mr. Knotek is the next speaker for 1 minute.
Děkuji, paní předsedající, pane komisaři, pane ministře.
Thank you, Madam President. I welcome the Commission's measures to reduce the impact of energy prices, measures taken as a result of the war in the Ukraine. Yes, let's develop renewable resources. Let's focus on energy efficiency, but please not no blanket solutions. Some member states will readjust their decarbonization efforts and will simply not be able to increase energy efficiency so much. So instead of blanket goals, let's focus on the support for the member states that really can increase energy efficiency, and let's incentivize them for that. Energy import from Russia is something that will delay the departure from coal. That will require legislation. So make proposals so that coal, for as far as they are necessary, should not be discriminated either.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. De Man for 1 minute.
Collega's.
Ladies and gentlemen, at the moment, the 27 EU member states are paying for Russian coal, gas, and oil, and they're paying a good €1 billion a day. The oil sheikhs also making huge profits because of the price of oil at 120 per barrel. Now, we're not really drawing the lessons from the oil crisis of the 70s, where we were held hostage by the oil sheikhs, and we can't have clean alternatives, because in Germany, for example, they get rid of those possible storage of energy, and now there's a cynical policy that the communists, the Greens are supporting this. We shouldn't be surprised at that, but that Christian Democrats and Liberals are actually going along with this crazy idea is really too much for words.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Vondra for 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, Russian gas and Russian oil are stained with Ukrainian blood, and we have to put an end to this right now. And we have to correct the error in Repower Europe, where we told Putin, we are going to be addicted to you like to cocaine for 7 years. But now he started to play with us again. He said, I don't want euros, I want rubles. So now we have a chance to tell him once and for all, we don't know rubles. What is that? That is not a currency. If you don't want euros, we will send them to a special escrow account. You will get nothing. There will be financial means for reparations to Ukraine when damages for your war crimes will be paid. Let's not miss this chance.
Dankeschön. Nächste Rednerin.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Weiss for 1 minute.
Madam President, we really need to take a lot of decisions in the European Union before we'll be able to reduce energy prices. We need to react now, Mr. Dombrovskis. We do know that the more energy savings we have, the better it will be for our wallet, for the climate, for the environment, for health, for productivity. And we all know energy is also a policy on which our security depends, which has an effect on our prosperity. So we need to look at energy effectiveness and savings urgently. There are rules, but they're insufficient. We need to up our level of ambition because it's not sufficient as it stands, but we also need the right tools to ensure effective energy use. We also need correct guidance, we need correct financing so each country can make progress. How can we ensure this happens? We have to ensure that the tools we have are clear, logical, easy to understand. Because the worst thing in a war is to find new solutions which make no sense for any country. I hope Council is going to finally start moving on this, or we will see no way out.
I know.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sayer is the next speaker for 1 minute.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, Minister. All of us here want to see a strong Europe which is independent and sovereign. but we shouldn't lie to ourselves. The reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that we only have a few billion left in our European budget. So all these redeployment, reassignment of funds, all the ways and means to avoid putting new money on the table is not going to be enough this time. Let us be consistent and set up SAFE, a new fund for the strategic autonomy for Europe, just like the recovery plan, to wean our states off hydrocarbons, to make sure we have independent agriculture, for strengthen our armies, to make more European all our strategic industries like chips, batteries and semiconductors. Commissioner, Minister, nobody wants to see a Europe weakened by a slew of dependencies. So, and if we want a Europe that protects and has come to terms with itself in an unstable world, we have to be more ambitious. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Tovaglieri for 1 minute.
The energy crisis is destroying citizens and businesses. It has dealt a blow to the economic recovery, and it is also giving Putin a weapon that he will use to blackmail us. Now the EU is born out of the ashes of the war as the European coal and steel community. Maybe we haven't learnt our lesson. Our founding fathers had a vision, but that led to ideology and a sense of guilt, and now we find ourselves in a situation of energy dependence, but we have to look at this if we want to have clout on the world stage. We have to act now. We need emergency measures to diversify energy sources, and we have to stop demonizing gas and nuclear power, and we also have to look at the issue of renewables. Our priority is to protect our economy, competitiveness, value chains, and above all, jobs. In order to do that, we have to overhaul the Green Deal, and we need specific and realistic responses. Otherwise, we will be abdicating our own history. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Als nächstes
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Bellamy for 1 minute.
Monsieur le Ministre.
Minister, Commissioner, the current situation clearly is a terrible crisis for European households whose energy prices are skyrocketing, and shows how dependent we are on Russia, which it makes our situation even more difficult when it comes to honouring our commitments to Ukraine in its crisis. The measures that have been announced by you gentlemen are necessary, but to make progress we need to start to produce again. That takes time. Commissioner, you mentioned using renewables. Unfortunately, I don't think we realise how vital it is to ensure that future energy mixes will use all energy sources. Whenever we install solar panels or heat pumps, we still need gas imported to install them. And it's a very simple equation. Why isn't it understood? It shows how many environmental organizations have actually benefited from Russia over the last years and the effect this has had on our energy mix. So let's use nuclear. Let's say it. That's going to be vital if we're to have decarbonized energy and to be able to guarantee our sovereignty and security. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Virkkunen for 1 minute.
Madam President, Minister, Vice President, every day we Europeans, we keep funding Putin's war by importing Russian fossil fuels. This is completely unacceptable, unsustainable and also immoral situation. Since the beginning of EU Energy Union and the Russian occupation in Crimea, there has been efforts to decrease our energy dependency from Russia. However, the direction has been opposite. The energy dependency rate is now at the record high level. This is a huge failure. The EU member states should now unite in energy policy in the same way they have united in security and defence in the past weeks. The member states should together stop Russian gas, oil and coal imports to Europe as soon as possible. The only sustainable way to ensure stable energy prices and security of supply in Europe in the future is to encourage investments in all viable clean forms of energy production, including nuclear energy. We can't afford to miss these decarbonisation benefits of any available alternatives.
Thank you very much. Ms. Niebler, I don't see in the chamber. No? Okay, then we'll move on to Ms. Thaler for 1 minute. Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to thank the Commission and the Council as well for your statements on our common European action to have more affordable, secure and sustainable energy supply. Here in the Chamber, you will find many a partner for this journey, but maybe I can just recall that at this very time, having ambitious goals is correct, but they have to be feasible as well. We don't have time to look at the production of green hydrogen and restrict our actions by having too tight criteria. We don't have time to have biofuels being produced in Europe under conditions where we're restricting our own way of being able to do this. So we shouldn't restrict ourselves in terms of these forms of renewable energy because we need them so badly. It's only through energy competition and a broad energy mix that we will finally be able to make sure that renewable energies will be made affordable and safe. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Roels is now here, so I'll give him the floor for 1 minute. Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues. Now, you can imagine you're going to have to brace yourselves for a hard landing because the energy market's affected by liquidity and there's massive panic. The socialist southern governments want to decouple gas price from the price of electricity, and they want to cap prices. These are solutions from the Pandora's box. Finding good answers in due time to allow secure supply of affordable energy for houses, households and companies are put at risk. For 20 years we've had a system of a common European energy market. The most ridiculous thing for us to do now is to throw it all out the window because nobody, absolutely nobody, will have an overview of the consequences of that. Instead of doing that, we should do two things. First of all, we should lower taxation on energy as far as possible, but keep the free energy market as it is in place. Secondly, stop the Green Deal and let us make sure that everything that's available, including fossil fuels and nuclear energies, to make sure that our European economy will not collapse as a result. Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings us on to the Catch the Eye procedure. There are 9 requests to take the floor. I won't be able to take all of them. Only 4 alone, come from the left. I beg your indulgence, we can't take all 4. And hence, I'll take Kanev, Gapini, Andolakis, Jonsa, Barena, Ata, and Todd on this occasion for the Catch the Eye procedure. And we'll start then with Mr. Kanev.
Dear Minister, Repower EU would have been an outstanding plan back in 2014 when war was predictable, but we failed to act. Now it is too little, too late. Now we need a plan by the hour and not by the decades. What we need is to impose a full energy embargo on Russian oil and gas in order to stop financing Putin's aggression. But we need also to be ready for Putin's regime to cut off our supply. The Council and Commission offer a long-term plan based on renewables and energy storage, and we all like it. But we don't see the emergency measures like immediate activation of the European Union, finishing work on interconnections as a matter of real emergency, starting as of now of joint procedures of gas from non-Russian sources, regulating cogeneration as an emergency source of energy, but also radically putting an end on red tape and corruption that are suffocating our renewable production. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Nächste Rednerin.
Thank you. Ms. Grappini is the next speaker.
Madam President, Commissioner, the crisis that we are going through now is predictable, not only because of a war, but the EU depends on one supplier so much. Any businessman knows that there's a huge risk. I'm very happy that in between these three pillars you have affordable prices. But what is affordable in Luxembourg is not affordable for Romanians, and we need to see that no one is left behind, because this is our motto, isn't it? So I think that we need to learn from our mistakes, because in Romania you've really pushed us. You've really pushed us to put a stop to coal extraction. But now we're importing coal from Russia. We need an energy union, Commissioner. We need an energy union that should be affordable to all EU citizens, no matter where they live. This is why I call on you that energy prices, that there be a system to control them. I'm a businesswoman. I know what a market economy means, but in times of crisis, we cannot let some people become rich by increasing prices tenfold. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Androulakis now.
At the summit today, we have to decide on immediate measures that are going to protect the economy and citizens, such as joint gas purchases, strategic storage, Eurobonds, and support finance. So we have to make sure that we extricate ourselves from fossil fuels in a socially just way. The RRF will have to look at upgrading networks. We have to focus on renewable energy sources, and we have to make sure that this is feasible for all citizens and not just a handful. We have to reduce VAT on basic commodities, and we also need windfall taxes on energy businesses during the crisis. We also have to look at retail prices and so on. All these proposals are a framework which shows solidarity to the European peoples. This is the way that we're going to be able to deal with inequalities, but also make sure that we have geopolitical security in Europe.
Mr. Johnson now.
Chairman, Commissioner, I would like to say that this gas hiccup that we are having now is a result of a dependency on Russian gas. Why are we buying gas from Russia is just another issue. On one hand, we are dealing with a war, and on the other hand, a energy revolution, and the RES revolution has not been embraced by our societies. Some societies, some nations need more time towards renewable energy sources, but this time has not been given by the European Union. That's why you will lose out on popularity. Commissioner Dombrovskis, 2 words for you. Access to a variety of energy sources, one thing, and secondly, energy security. Legal framework must be in place for a variety of energy sources to be available in the European Union.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barena Afa is the next speaker.
Thank you very much. Recently, the Commission presented joint action for affordable, secure energy so that the EU would be independent of Russian fuel well ahead of 2030, as well as to respond to the price hike in energy prices and to ensure that we have gas next winter, Repower EU. But there are worrying issues such as importing LNG from the US, reusing nuclear, and ensuring not that we phase out fossil fuel, but only Russian fossil fuel. We have to look at the effect on citizens and SMEs. We need to change the market model that we have, which acts against public interests. and just provides windfalls for electricity and gas companies. We need to move to the green transition without prejudicing our energy mix by stepping up our action on renewables. I think that we need to ensure that we do this, even if it does annoy Algeria. Sanchez's decision on the Western Sahara not only runs counter to international law, it's also going to make it more difficult for us to find alternative energy supplies.
Dankeschön. Und
Thank you very much. To conclude, Ms. Todt.
Tisztelt elnök asszony, az energia...
Madam President, energy prices are steeply going up, and this has been worsened by the war in Ukraine. We are now seeing record prices, so we need effective solutions. There is no alternative, however, from one day to another. We need to have a better approach to energy security. I believe that it is a good thing that the EU Commission has finally supported the introduction of price caps, which is very in line with the policy of the Hungarian government. We need to reduce utility bills. In Hungary, we have not seen an increase in utility bills in the past. Unfortunately, the left in Hungary has also espoused the idea of market prices, which made energy prices very difficult, very high for consumers. We don't want any more of that. We need to protect our families. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. Then, on behalf of the Commission, I now give the floor to the Executive Vice President, Mr. Dombrovskis.
Madam Chair, Mr. Minister, honourable members, thank you for your fruitful exchange and for your comments and remarks. I want to assure you that the Commission will continue engaging with the European Parliament as this work is going forward. Based on your questions and remarks, I understand you share the Commission's concerns that our efforts need to focus on the three main issues: ensuring affordable energy prices for European consumers, security of supply, meaning that we are fully prepared for the next winter season regardless what happens, diminishing and eventually completely removing our dependence on Russian fossil fuels. These three aims mutually reinforce each other. In Versailles, leaders supported the proposals in our communication of 8th of March and asked the Commission to propose a Repower EU plan to phase out Russian fossil fuels by 2027, backed by the necessary national and European resources. This is what we are now working full speed to make it happen. I also would like to thank all the members who today expressed their support for the Commission's work. Our plans are very ambitious, as it is required by the current situation, but it also means that we need your support to quickly adopt all legislative proposals, starting with the gas storage proposal adopted this week. We also count on your support on accelerating the work on the December package, which includes important provisions on security of supply. And finally, a crucial part of decreasing our dependency on Russian gas is diminishing our consumption of gas altogether. Therefore, we hope to also move very fast on all the legislative proposals under Fit for 55, and we count on your support. This is part of the solution to make the EU resilient to shocks and less dependent on Russian fossil fuels. We need to be united while facing these challenging times, and if there is one thing that crisis is showing us, that the EU is more united than ever in responding to Putin and supporting Ukrainian people. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Na záver v rozprave vystúpi.
Thank you very much. And now the French Minister, Mr. Born, has the floor.
Thank you, President. Vice President, members of the Parliament, a few comments to add to what the Commission has just said, which I would broadly support. You has said, as the Commission did in his introduction, and which was clear in the remarks made too, that there are two kinds of crises accumulating today, leading to skyrocketing of energy prices. First, of the price rise which we'd already seen as a result of COVID and the economic recovery, which was good news in a way, but had led to a hike in gas and electricity and fuel prices. Then we have to add to that the war, and that showed that we had a structural dependency on Russian gas in particular, which is unacceptable at the moment. And this was the case for almost all member states. As such, we needed to act more robustly, more quickly, with different kinds of responses, which I will only briefly recap to summarise the discussion that took place in a council and will take place in the next council. First of all, how vital it is to reinforce our tools for regulation and coordination at a European level. This is one of the debates that has been ongoing in council on the basis of recent proposals from Commission, with the question of common storage to deal with supply problems. Without a doubt, I'd say that's an issue where the member states agree the most. The question of possible joint purchasing, which I think needs further detail and which we think is the right direction, and a question amongst member states, the question of capping final prices for consumers in crisis times. I think that cannot be excluded, although I would say quite clearly and frankly that this is the subject of complex debates amongst the member states. We have to bear in mind the achievements of the internal market and reinforce our energy interconnections. That's vital considering the tensions that exist, but we need to better protect consumers with regulatory tools which need to either be beefed up or redesigned for the future. Then another component which has made life more difficult has been the lack of energy sovereignty. As has been said in the debate, as I said, the European project was based on energy sovereignty and has been from the outset. Not only have we to set common climate goals at EU, and we've had that for 2 years, for 2030 and 2050, but together today we need to speed up the transition. That's the whole point of the legislative package that Council is trying to get through, Fit for 55, to develop green, affordable, stable, sovereign sources of energy. Sources that may be differed but have to include renewable and nuclear energy, I would say, that both meet this criteria. This is a goal in terms of sovereignty, diversification. The Repower EU plan incorporates this, and we support that because we have to speed up our reduction on dependence on Russian energy ASAP, and that still is being discussed in Council. We also need coordination to ensure we're not competing with each other to find alternative supply solutions. And as has just been recalled by the Vice President and many speakers, we also have to reduce our energy use because our energy dependency is also based on our energy use, which we need to better master. Along with diversification and regulation, I think we have the necessary tools available to us. France, for a long time, has been calling for energy sovereignty, and so has the French presidency put this on the agenda, but unfortunately common circumstances require us to move forward on this even more quickly than would have been the case.
Rozprava sa týmto skončila.
Thank you very much. That brings this debate to an end. We move on to the next item on our agenda, which concerns the oral questions to the Council Commission, update from the Commission and Council on the state of play of the Energy Charter Treaty modernisation exercise. And the author, Mr. Bernd Lange, has the floor first. Thank you very much, Vice President, Minister. The question of the Energy Charter Treaty, of course, is inextricably linked with the debate that we've just had. Since 1994, in the European Union, we've worked together with other countries to try and establish a stable framework for energy provision. And, as it happens, we've tried to include Russia as an important provider, supplier of fossil fuels. And the significance of this attempt is something that we've seen recently with the Russian attack on Ukraine. The question of energy supply, energy security in Europe is back on the agenda. So we have to raise the question, is this treaty from 1994, and just as an aside, one that Russia actually left in 2009, is this treaty future-proofed still, or is it a millstone around our neck? I think there are three central issues here. And the answer to these questions will bring us closer to the point as to whether this is future-proofed or a millstone around our neck. So first of all, the treaty from 1994, there was enshrined in this treaty a focus on fossil fuels, on the energy suppliers, on investments, and on the technologies in fossil fuel energies. Now, you could probably understand that. Back in 1994, we didn't have the Green Deal, we didn't have obligations that we would leave Russian gas behind by 2027. None of that was there. And so you could probably understand why there was a focus and concentration there, and also why the renewable energies weren't included to such an extent back then. So we cannot say that this is future-proofed if there's so much focus on fossil fuels. We need to have the obligations of the Paris Agreement also reflected and guaranteed in this treaty. The second point then is, does this energy treaty achieve what we want to achieve? Is there more investment in renewable energies that's being undermined because of that? Well, yes, there is no obligation for sustainable goals to be achieved in investment terms here. And even worse, there are investors who are complaining against the closure of a coal-fired power station. Now, we want to get away from producing energy from coal, so how can we agree to a treaty where the measures to reduce the production of electricity through coal that we're trying to avoid is now being reversed? Surely that is not contemporary to what we want to do. This right to regulate should really not be questioning sustainability and future-proofing this. The third question is whether the form of investor protection, this old ISDS system, where investors can actually claim against a state due to what they can expect to have gained in terms of profit. No, we want an investment system that will have obligations and rights, checks and balances, a public court such as the investment court system. That's what we would like to have, but that's not in there. Instead of that, we've got 88 cases where investors have taken EU states to court. These bilateral complaints and cases are increasing. The European Court of Justice is saying this is anachronistic, this is illegal. And if you look at these three systems and see that since 2017, there has been a degree of discussion about reform, but to date there hasn't been any definitive results that are on the table, then my personal view is that there can only be one conclusion, and that is we should leave behind the Energy Charter Treaty. We want energy to be arranged in a sustainable way, not hanging over, having a sword of Damocles hanging over it as to investor-state disputes being raised. That will not happen, that 56 member states will suddenly say we want to promote green energy and we're going to reject the investor-state dispute settlement system. So what are we going to do? Are we going to get enough transparency? We're going to get the documents? Are we going to see these complaints stopping us? Can we modernise this so that we don't have the 20-year sunset clause? I think today we don't want this millstone around our neck for energy policy anymore. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalší v rozprave.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Clément Beaune, Minister on behalf of the Council.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, President, Vice President of the European Commission, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for putting this topic on the agenda. Before the French presidency of the Council of the European Union, as a European Affairs Minister, together with my colleagues, the Economy Minister, among others, I've already talked about this. You reminded us of the Energy Charter Treaty and its provisions and the fact that it doesn't respond to today's challenges. The priority of overhauling the treaty is about adapting the treaty to climate change, the decarbonization of the economy, human rights, and international labor standards. As you know, the main response of the EU to the current energy crisis has been to invest in renewables. So that is why the EU has adopted the position of removing protection of investment in fossil fuels. Now, negotiations started in 2019, about 3 years ago, and the goal is to adopt a new text with the necessary tweaks in June 2022. You're asking me about the state of play, and I'd like to remind you of the fact that we've had 11 negotiating rounds so far. The last meeting of the group on modernization took place in March, just a few days ago, from the 1st to the 4th of March. The negotiations focused on several topics, such as the definition of investment, the definition of economic activity in the field of energy, and corporate social responsibility. Now, today I would like to look at the definition of economic activity in energy. The European Commission's proposal is to exclude protection of future investment in fossil fuels. This is very clear. The delegations are continuing their debate on the latest proposal put forward by the Secretariat in order to implement the principle of phasing out of investment protection in this area. Each contracting party has different climate targets and goals, and over the next two rounds that are planned for April and May, we will have an opportunity to go into more depth into these issues and to assess, as I said before, whether this process can allow us to achieve our goals in line with our ambitions. We're going to have to see whether this compromise is realistic or not. We'll have to see whether we can thrash out a compromise, whether it reflects our ambitions, and there will be an extraordinary meeting of the Energy Charter Treaty in order to confirm an alternative agreement. If the negotiations are not satisfactory for the EU, we have to look at other options on the table, such as a withdrawal. It will have to be a coordinated withdrawal from the Energy Charter Treaty. Now, ladies and gentlemen, not as presidency, but as French minister, together with my economy and energy colleagues and the support of some member states, I wrote a letter, which is public, saying that if the goal of modernization cannot be achieved, we should quickly contemplate the withdrawal of EU countries from the treaty. The war in Ukraine was also dealt with in the last meeting. We cannot ignore the dramatic backdrop that also affects energy. We've talked about this. Many contracting parties, including the EU, but the UK, Switzerland and Japan, very firmly and collectively condemned the unjustified military aggression of Russia against Ukraine, which is a contracting party of the Charter. We are in regular contact discussing the negotiations, and the European Parliament has to be involved as well, according to Article 218 of the treaty. In 2019, the Council informed the European Parliament that it was triggering negotiations, and during each and every rotating presidency, there are meetings organized, and of course the Council is at the disposal of the European Parliament. We want transparency, we are in favor of cooperation, and I personally am at your disposal in order to give you feedback on the different rounds of negotiations. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia v rozprave vystúpi.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the EPP group, Ms. Danuta Hübner for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. It was Commissioner to speak now.
My apologies. My apologies. My apologies, Mr. Commissioner. Takže v rozprave vystúpi za Európsku komisiu výkonný.
I do apologise, of course, on behalf of the Commission, Mr. Valdis Dombrovskis. I do apologise.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Minister, honourable members, with the modernisation of the Energy Charter Treaty, the Commission pursues two main objectives. First, to reform the investment protection and dispute settlement rules in order to ensure that the goal of protecting and encouraging investments does not affect the ability of the EU and its member states to pursue public policy objectives. And second, to make sure that Energy Charter Treaty is in line with EU's sustainable development objectives, namely environmental protection, labour rights, climate change and energy transition. The contracting parties of the Energy Charter Treaty have agreed to organise an ad hoc charter conference in mid-June with a view to agree on a broad package of amendments to the Energy Charter Treaty. Before that conference, the Commission and Member States will take stock of the negotiations and assess if EU's objectives have been met. On your specific questions, the current energy crisis does not change the EU's position in these negotiations. The need to bring the Energy Charter Treaty in line with our climate and sustainable development objectives is stronger than ever. As always, we keep the European Parliament informed beyond the regular feedback on the modernisation of the Energy Charter Treaty in INTA and ITRA committees. The Commission also informs in detail the members of INTA Monitoring Group after each round of negotiations. As regards the definition of economic activity, the contracting parties objected to the original proposal by the EU to remove the protection for fossil fuels investments from the agreement. However, a more flexible approach is in carving out fossil fuel investments in line with the Paris Agreement and the enshrined principle of collective but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities has now been accepted by all contracting parties, including the EU. The contracting parties are currently working on the modalities of this carve-out. The EU has proposed a carve-out of the protection for fossil fuel investments for the EU territory. Other contracting parties may propose a carve-out for their territories as well. As regards investment to state dispute settlement, the Commission is in the process of improving the ICT provisions by pushing for full transparency, disclosure of third-party funding, introducing reform provisions on valuation of damages and prevention of frivolous claims. The Commission has not proposed negotiating a plurilateral investment court system within the Energy Charter Treaty context, since the EU aims to create a multilateral investment court at United Nations level. Once the multilateral investment court is established, it will be also applied to the Energy Charter Treaty by the EU member states and those third parties that agree to it. If the EU cannot achieve its objectives, we will have to consider other options, including the withdrawal from the Energy Charter Treaty. However, the EU and its member states will subsequently be bound by the sunset clause of the Energy Charter Treaty. It means remaining bound as regards existing investments for another 20 years by unmodernised Energy Charter Treaty. So we need to evaluate our options carefully. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Takže teraz v rozprave vystupí.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Danuta Hübner for 1.5 minutes.
Vice President, with energy prices that were already on the rise before the war, and now with the illegal, tragic and insane invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and taking into account the impact of sanctions, the modernization of the Energy Charter Treaty is happening under a different light and with a regained momentum. We have to bear in mind that key provisions of the treaty remain unchanged since the 1990s. It is also today the most litigated investment agreement in the world. Provisions are not up to par with modern standards, especially those on the protection of investments. So I support the efforts undertaken by the Commission to negotiate provisions that reflect the EU's reformed approach on investment protection and your firm intention to conclude the negotiations in June. In the event that the negotiation is inconclusive, I would like to strongly encourage the Commission to consider and prepare the option of a coordinated exit from the ECT that would take into account our current geopolitical context, mitigate the effect of the 20-year sunset clause, and alleviate to the extent possible the negative impact on the security of our energy supply. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia v rozprave vystúpi za skupinu S&D.
Thank you very much. Now for the S&D, Ms. Rodriguez Pinheiro.
Thank you, President, Vice President, Commissioner Dombrovskis. The ECT that we're familiar with is completely unacceptable for my group, for the EU, and of course for the sustainability of our planet. I'd like to express my concerns for the position of those contracting parties to the treaty that do not share the ambitions of the European Union when it comes to mitigation of climate change, sustainable development, and the green transition, in spite of the fact that they're signatories to the Paris Agreement. To be able to support the modernization of this treaty, the Commission and the Council have to ensure that a series of conditions are met. The list of energy materials that are protected must exclude most investments in fossil fuels and include green hydrogen. Explicitly banned must be that protectors in fossil fuels can ask the contracting parties to apply public policies that would lead to the gradual elimination of fossil fuels in line with the requirements of the Paris Agreement. It is also vital to ensure that the protection of investment is only conceded to real assets rather than investments for financial purposes, most of which are speculative. And we have to guarantee the capacity of the European Union to develop consistent public policies with our goal of turning ourselves into the first region of the world that will be climatically neutral by 2050. If these conditions are not met in June of this year, then the Commission and the Member States should prepare for a coordinated exit from the treaty. And prior to this, and I'd ask this of you, Mr. Dombrovskis, we need an impact assessment of such a withdrawal. We have to be prepared for that situation. I would also ask the Commission to ensure that the Court of Justice ruling prevails, whereby the provisions of ISDS in the ECT are not applicable in the case of disputes, intra-community disputes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the Renew Europe group, Marie-Pierre Vedren for 1.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Executive Vice President, Minister Clément. Would we accept Gazprom attacking member states because Nord Stream has been suspended? This could happen with the current Energy Charter Treaty. We have to be pragmatic, and sovereignty has to guide us as well. We have to exclude fossil fuels from the scope of the Charter Treaty. We also have to look at the issue of investment of dispute settlement. We have to replace it with a fair system that protects our rights. Now, there also has to be a coordinated withdrawal if things don't go well. It has been said that we cannot carry out the same trade and investment policies as 10 years ago. And the current Energy Charter Treaty is not only not appropriate, but it's incompatible with the Paris Accord, it's incompatible with the commitments that we have undertaken in the Green Deal and the climate law. We've got June 2022 approaching, and we've got the reality of negotiations to look at. No signatory party doesn't want to tweak the Charter Treaty. The Commission said that this is an outdated treaty and it shouldn't apply to intra-EU disputes. We have to draw the conclusions of the fact that the negotiations have failed and we have to withdraw from the treaty. Thank you.
Veľmi pekne. Ďalšia v rozprave vystúpi za skupinu Green.
Thank you very much. Now for the Greens, Ms. Anna Cavazzini for 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, dear Vice President, dear Minister, dear colleagues, I think the absolute urgency of moving away from fossil fuels is finally visible to all. We are realizing how much we need policy space, public money, and strategic private investment to make this shift away from fossil fuels to renewable happen. Yet, the Energy Charter Treaty is keeping us back, and I think we have a big unity on that in the European Union, and it's good. Millions and millions of euro of lost public money, the litigation, the threats of expensive cases, and the changes that did not happen because of said threats. The Energy Charter Treaty is a danger for the Green Deal and the energy transition, and we need an urgent solution to these problems, and many colleagues mentioned this today. I applaud the Commission for trying to modernise the Energy Charter Treaty, but I fear the modernisation is not delivering. It is too little, it is too late. The EU is pushing for an ECT reform that in itself is not compatible with the Paris Agreement. And the possible landing zones that are identified by the negotiators are even significantly weaker. Fossil fuel protection will not end with this proposal. So, dear Commissioner, dear Ministers, dear colleagues, I believe it is really time to free our governments from this really irrational, irresponsible shackles of the Energy Charter Treaty. A coordinated exit is legally not very complex to organise. All it needs is political will. I urge you to exit this treaty, neutralise its sunset clause and get on with the fastest shift away from fossil fuels that we can make happen. And 2 questions at the end, because I think they were not answered really in your introduction. Are you already preparing this exit? Because I think it is too late if we in June notice that we don't have any modernised approach. Are you coordinating and preparing already the exit? And can we as Parliament have access to all the negotiation documents? Thank you so much.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on behalf of the European Conservatives and Reformists groups, Ms. Anna Zalewska for 1 minute.
Panie Przewodniczący, Panie Komisarzu, Panie...
Chairman, Commissioner, Minister, we are all aware that this war has changed everything, turned every table, and it needs to change the European policy, energy policy, in order to make sure that we are energy sovereign. We need to make sure that every single source of energy is respected, also fossil source of energy. We need to open ourselves to internationally recognized technology for the carbon capture, new models, diversification, gas storage. All those types of technologies are needed to make sure that the prices of energy are lower. We need to look into the ETS again, as this is the source of speculative prices. Perhaps the commissioner here has ways and means of overseeing the ETS system. And now we're talking about ETS 2, which would apply to fuels for cars. We need to draw lessons from the situation.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalší v rozprave vystúpi.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Morel for the Left Group. For 1 minute.
Thank you very much. The war in Ukraine has raised in a very tragic way the whole issue of dependence on fossil fuels, and to talk about such an outdated text such as the Energy Charter Treaty might seem derisory. For 20 years now we have been suffering with this text. Multinationals are getting exorbitant profits. For 20 years the decisions to promote renewables are attacked by multinationals that are benefiting from hundreds, if not billions of dollars in compensation. The Commission said that it wants to overhaul this outdated treaty that flies in the face of the Paris Accord, but even the European Court of Justice has said it's completely out of date. I don't think we're going to be able to modernize this. I think the reality is that we're going to have to withdraw, and that we should withdraw as quickly as possible. This is the best possible option. We have better things to do than to remain trapped in this outdated charter that incarnates a neoliberal Europe which we want no longer.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia v rozprave vystúpi pani.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Eniko Juri for 1 minute.
Thank you, President, Vice President, Minister, colleagues. Hungary is pioneering in greening the economy, so we are in favor of the modernization of the Charter. But I'd like to ask the Commission to be very careful in these negotiations, because the impacts of the current war are obvious. High prices, endangered connections. In such times, we cannot make hasty decisions. I plead to the Commission to evaluate what are the direct and indirect impacts of the modernization in terms of the energy supply, the networks, and the purse of the EU citizens. Besides greenings, it is important to have affordable energies and safety and security of supplies. The EU can only promote measures that do not render any member state into a disadvantageous position. This is the most important aspect. I'm glad that the Commission understands that the Hungarian policy of household energy bill cuts and subsidies of households is not the devil's tool. In case of a war, it is very important to think in the long term and with cool heads.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Kelly for 1 minute.
Investment is essential to the implementation of the energy transition and meeting our climate ambitions, requiring a drastic increase in investment in renewables. Our economies have been scarred by Brexit, the pandemic, and now the horrific war in Ukraine, waged by a callous tyrant. But climate change remains the overarching existential problem facing the entire planet and every living being on it. The Energy Charter Treaty aims to establish a level playing field for cross-border investment. However, it was signed in 1994. The world has changed since then, and we are now entering a pivotal decade where we need real climate action. The ECT should be revised to prioritise low-carbon investment over carbon-intensive investment, not used as a means to curtail ambition at the expense of society. We have committed in law to climate neutrality by 2050. We should ensure all legal instruments and obligations are in line with this, and this means dramatically updating the ECT.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ďalšia v rozprave.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Kathleen van Bremt for 1.5 minutes. Thank you, President. A lot of people have already said this, that the world has changed fundamentally, and it's become painfully clear that we are dependent on fossil fuels and how bad that is. Of course, our focus today is on Russian gas, but it would be fundamentally wrong to switch one dependency for another dependency on a form of fossil fuels, because fossil fuels are dirty, expensive, and come from regions which suffer from geo-instability, but also are subject to dictatorial regions. And that is valid for the ECT as well. This treaty goes back to 1994, and over 30 years it hasn't changed at all, as if the world hadn't changed. And through the ECT, fossil fuel companies can actually make sure that they are making profit, and if not, claim for damages. How can that work? The negotiations to deal with the ECT are now have been going on for 4 years. They've been dragging on. I don't see any single positive outcome from this. So we have to start drawing conclusions. If we're talking about modernisation of the ECT and that's not working, and it seems the longer it goes on, the more that's likely to be the case, then maybe it doesn't make sense anymore. And I think, Commissioner, you have support across the whole chamber here to act. I think we have to draw that clear conclusion that maybe this is time now to leave behind that treaty. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Aurore-Laluc for 1 minute.
President, Commissioner, Minister, colleagues, I have to say that for people like me who are asking that we phase out fossil fuels and have done for years, the debate today is actually very painful. And I am bitter because it took a war for us to realise the geopolitical and environmental damage caused by our dependency. So thinking that we could leave the ECT is something positive. And I think that is the clear message. Why? Because we can't carry on paying damages to investors who for years have been making money out of climate deregulation. I think actually all of this is going to take a long time. Negotiations will take forever, give and take. So please listen to us. Let's work for this, let's prepare for this and have a coordinated exit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Łukasz Kohut for 1 minute.
Panie Przewodniczący, Panie Komisarzu.
Chairman, Commissioner, freedom has its price. Energy freedom has its particular price, and however, peace is priceless. Now we are dealing with an aggressor, Putin, and he's sitting on enormous amounts of gas. Now, steel and coal community was created because of the experiences of the war. Now the history has come a full circle. We need to create an energy union which would express our solidarity in order to make sure that the war doesn't happen again, and also that the climate disaster does not happen. But until such time, we need to make sure that we use our own resources. Let's stop importing coal and gas from Russia. We need to make sure that we have the necessary courage.
We now move to the Catch the Eye, and I have received one request from Mr. Mick Wallace. Please, you have the floor.
The Energy Charter Treaty is a relic of a fossil fuel past and beyond reform. The EU is probably wasting its time by engaging in a reform process. It isn't going anywhere. The reforms will not be coherent with the Paris Agreement targets and the European Green Deal for three main reasons. It won't immediately end protection for all fossil fuel investments. At best, existing coal, gas and oil investments would continue to be protected well into the mid-2030s. Secondly, it won't end the old investor-state dispute settlement system. This is not even part of the negotiations. And thirdly, it won't guarantee states' right to regulate by introducing effective limits to investors' rights. Also, the proposals to include hydrogen and biomass in the list of energy technologies that are protected under the treaty would only increase the risk of investor-state dispute settlement challenges. The Energy Charter Treaty cannot be modernised or fixed, and the EU should withdraw from the treaty. Thank you, President.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Za Európsku komisiu teraz.
Thank you very much. Now on behalf of the European Commission, I give the floor to Valdis Dombrovskis. You have the floor, sir.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Minister, honourable members, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, by mid-June the Commission will take stock of the negotiations and will draw its conclusions. So to come back more specifically on some of the questions which had been raised, so first on transparency. The European Commission is strongly committed to ensuring trade policy is transparent and inclusive in order to improve legitimacy and public trust. In this context, the Commission has published the initial proposal for the modernisation of the Energy Charter Treaty. The contracting parties of the Energy Charter Treaty have agreed to publish after each round a common public communication. The communication after the first round presents the agenda and issues discussed. After the second round, upon instigation of the EU and some other contracting parties, the contracting parties have published a second document that reflects the discussions of the second round even better, despite the initial wish of several contracting parties not to reveal this information. The EU will all continue to urge other contracting parties to improve the transparency of the ECT modernisation process. However, at current stage, given the confidentiality of negotiations, as the contracting parties have decided, the Commission is not in a position to share all negotiating documents. Nevertheless, the Commission is sharing. Well, we're sharing our own proposals. As I said, the initial proposal and the proposal for a fossil fuel carve-out, and we are informing the European Parliament regularly on the negotiations. The second specific question which was raised concerns the sunset clause and what would be the options to reduce or neutralise the sunset clause. Because indeed, theoretically speaking, there is a possibility that contracting parties could enter into inter se agreement to neutralise the sunset clause. Well, as regards this question, we have always been of the view that the ECT should not apply between the EU member states in the first place, and this has now been confirmed by several European Court of Justice judgments. Thus, an inter se agreement may indeed be needed, but would bring little additional benefits. Second, there are probably very few contracting parties at this stage that are willing to enter into such an agreement with the EU and its member states, because they have nothing to gain unless they want to withdraw themselves. But again, there is no contracting party that is now hinting at that. So the Commission remains of the opinion that the best outcome is to have reformed Energy Charter Treaty in line with EU's sustainable development and climate action objectives, rather than having unreformed Energy Charter Treaty applying for the EU and Member States during 20 years sunset period triggered by unilateral withdrawal. Beyond the EU, a reformed Energy Charter Treaty will leverage a larger collective positive impact by all contracting parties. This is very important considering the sustainable development and climate action are global challenges that the EU cannot tackle alone. But as I said also in introductory remarks, if we cannot achieve these objectives, we will consider other options, including withdrawal from the Energy Charter Treaty. And of course, we will look in this case on all possible ways to mitigate the impact of an unreformed ICT and of 20 years of sunset clause. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne a za...
Thank you very much. Now for the Council, the floor goes to Mr. Clément Beaune, Minister of State for European Affairs. You have the floor, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Vice President, I don't have very much to add to what Mr. Dombrovskis just said, but let me just say that we've got to give the two upcoming rounds of negotiations a chance. I said that we have it in the second half of April and then in May. So it's only after these two rounds that we'll be able to assess the process of modernization. It's only then that we'll be able to see whether it's going to deliver on getting rid of investment protection in fossil fuels. Now, if that is not possible over the next few weeks, then we have to consider alternative options. It would be better to have a reformed charter that will cover other countries and that will make sure that the treaty is adapted to the Paris Accords and the end of fossil fuels. But if this result isn't possible, we will envisage a coordinated withdrawal of EU countries from the treaty. Now, coordinating a withdrawal is a better option. It's better than just a handful of countries and a disorganized withdrawal. A coordinated withdrawal will have more of an impact. Now, as I said, on behalf of the French government, I talked about this a few months ago. We will defend this depending on the results of the upcoming rounds in April and May. Thank you.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Rozprava sa týmto skončila.
Thank you very much. The debate is closed.
Ďakujem.